I am Onan, son of Judah. You've heard my name whispered in sermons, etched in warnings, or tucked away in footnotes as a man God struck down. But no one tells the story of how I came to be the man I became. No one asks what it's like to live in the shadow of a brother, or what happens to a soul too proud to obey, but too afraid to rebel. I will tell you now, if you will listen. I am dust, I am spirit, I am memory, I am warning. But before the curse, before the judgment, before my name turned bitter in the mouths of scribes, there was is my older brother, standing tall, serious, with fire in his eyes. From the day I was weaned, he towered over me like a tree I could never climb. He was first in line for everything. First to speak, first to eat, first to train with the shepherds, first to win our father's pride. I did not hate him, not at first. I feared him. He had that kind of strength that makes others obey without asking why. But he also had something darker in him. I saw it the day he struck a servant for speaking before him, and the day he lied to our father about a missing lamb and let me take the blame. Our father, Judah, was not a gentle man. He had lived long enough to be wounded by life and wore those wounds like armor. There was a time, I think, when he knew peace, when he was just one of 12 sons walking behind a man named Jacob. But something broke in him after the affair with Joseph. He became hard. He looked at my older brother, with hope. He looked at me like a shadow, and so I became one. Is to Trowan, Zai mein Vater and Octon. Her name is Tamar, a Canaanite woman, strong, beautiful, dangerous. He said it like a warning. Smirked when he heard. I will take her, he said, and she will be mine. And she was, at least for a time. She came veiled, she came proud, she came quiet. I thought her eyes were sad, but I was young and knew little of women's eyes. I only knew that my older brother seemed to lose more of himself after marrying her. He grew bitter, restless, angry. He struck our servants more often. He stopped praying. Then one morning, he simply did not wake up. No one spoke of it aloud, but we all felt it. But I had seen the signs long before. The animals that died near him, the dreams he had where his body burned but never turned to ash. The time he screamed in the night and swore he saw a figure in white standing at the foot of his bed. My older brother was judged, not by men, not by kings, but by the God of our fathers. And I, second-born, lesser, overlooked, I was chosen to step into his sandals. My father came to me with the command, take Tamar as wife, raise up seed to your brother. He said it like law, not request. In our tradition, the law was sacred. A brother who died without children was to be honored. His name continued through the body of his brother, through the womb of his widow. It was an ancient covenant, a holy one. But as Judah spoke, I watched Tamar in the corner of the tent. She did not cry. She did not smile. She only looked at me, and in her eyes I saw neither love nor hate. I saw expectation. That was worse. I married her, not with joy, not with songs, not even with a feast. It was a quiet affair, as though the family feared to speak too loudly, lest God hear and strike again. The nights that followed were colder than the desert's edge. Tamar said little. I said even less. There was no love, only duty, only silence. And within that silence, I began to form a plan. Why should the seed be for Why should his name continue, not mine? Why must I raise children who would not carry my legacy? I am not a vessel for ghosts. I began to despise the nights. Tamar's eyes seemed to search my soul, even as we lay together. And each time I would draw back, released my ejaculation to the ground, whispering to myself, "It is enough. God does not see, but oh, he does." I began to feel the earth itself turn cold beneath me. The wind whispered her name. My hands grew weaker. My heart beat faster in the silence. I tried to forget, but guilt is like shadow. It grows long when light fades. Thus began my descent. And you, reader, must now decide if you see me as villain or victim. But know this, it is a terrible thing to live in the shadow of a brother, and worse still, to try and escape it with your soul intact. They never told me that a dead man's name can feel heavier than a living man's body. When I walked into the tent that first night as Tamar's husband, not by love, not by joy, but by law, I thought I was doing a holy thing. But holiness without the heart is a burden, a dead weight, and it crushed me slowly. Silence, Tamar's gaze. Tamar spoke even less after our union. There was no mourning ritual for her, no songs, no tears, only stillness. She would rise before the sun, her hair veiled, her posture straight. She never flinched when I approached. She never smiled when I spoke. And yet she haunted me like a voice I couldn't silence. Her very presence reminded me of him, of It was as if every time I entered her, I could hear his name echo in the tent walls. What kind of man lays with his brother's widow and calls it obedience? The law and the blood. The elders would tell us, to carry the name of your brother is a righteous act. It is love. It is duty. But what if the brother was wicked? What if the brother was the kind of man whose memory clings to the bones of the house? What if the widow, silent and strong, deserved more than a half-hearted inheritance? I lay awake many nights, clutching the blanket over my chest, asking Yahweh, must the dead name live through me? But the heavens said nothing, only the stars burned. Judah, my father, came to me one evening. He looked older than I remembered, his beard more silver than black, his eyes sunken with something he didn't name. He sat beside me by the olive trees, chewing a leaf as he used to do when he was angry. "You have done what is right," he said, but I hadn't, and we both knew it. I had performed the act. I had sex with Tamar, but I had held back the one thing the law demanded of me, my seed. Judah looked at me and said nothing more. But as he walked away, I noticed his shoulders stooped like a man carrying a judgment that had not yet come. It was the 3rd month of our marriage when Tamar finally spoke to me. We were sitting beneath the almond tree, the one used to climb in childhood. She didn't look at me when she spoke. Her hands were busy weaving. "Do you fear your brother?" she asked. I looked up sharply. "He is dead. Even the dead can rule us," she said quietly. She said no more, but her words dug deep, because she was right. Spilled seed, heavy guilt. Night after night, I repeated the same act. I would go have sex with her, but never finish the duty. I let the earth drink the ejaculation instead of her womb, a bitter crop. Each time I told myself, "It is enough. I have obeyed in part. That should satisfy the law. That should satisfy God." But the guilt grew like a tree in my chest, curling its roots around my ribs. It was no accident. I knew what I was doing. But more terrifying than the guilt was the feeling that someone, somewhere was watching. Not Tamar, not Judah, but someone higher, and he was not pleased. The earth refused me. I began to notice things. The livestock grew thin. The fields near my tent grew dry. My skin itched at night. My joints ached. My sleep turned shallow. Even the air in my tent seemed stale. as if breath itself refused to stay long in my lungs. I went to the priests. They saw nothing. I went to the elders. They quoted the law. I even asked my youngest brother, Shela, who had always looked up to me. He only said, "Why are you so afraid, brother?" And I realized I wasn't afraid of judgment. I was afraid that I already was judged. No one saw it as rebellion, not at first, but I knew. I was rebelling not with sword or word, but with seed, with the most sacred part of life itself. I had placed my own legacy above obedience. I had whispered, "Let die twice, once in body and again in name." I wore obedience like a robe, but my heart had already fled the altar. One night after I had done what I always did, rise and let the earth drink, I caught her eyes in the darkness. She wasn't asleep. She had been watching me. There was no anger in her face, only sorrow, and something deeper, understanding. She knew, and I hated how that made me feel. There was a night when the wind changed. It came from the east, cold and dry. It howled like wolves through the tents. I heard the wooden beams creak. I heard the jars rattle. And then, I swear, I heard my name in the wind. Onan, whispered twice, soft, but full of fire. I stumbled out into the night, barefoot on cold sand, and cried out, "What do you want from me?" The sky gave no answer, only stars, silent witnesses to a disobedient soul. I began to dread the morning. By the 10th night, I no longer looked Tamar in the eye. I no longer walked among the elders. I no longer prayed. What was the point? I had chosen my path. I had measured my obedience in fractions. I had tried to please God with half offerings. I had become a man of the shadow, a man holding seed that would never grow. They say sin is like a lion crouching at the door, waiting to devour. But what they do not say, what no elder or priest will ever tell you, is that sometimes the lion walks beside you, sometimes you feed it, and sometimes you grow to need its company. The weight of a single act. The first time I spilled the ejaculation, my hands trembled. It felt unnatural, like twisting the branch of a young tree before its first fruit. Tamar said nothing. She only lay still, as though she had expected it. Her silence, however, struck harder than any word. I washed myself in the stream outside the camp. I remember the chill of the water, the reflection of my face, half lit by moonlight, half hidden by night. I whispered, "Forgive me," but I said it only once, because forgiveness means change, and I had no plans to change. Night after night, it became a ritual. Tamar and I would lie together in a silence deeper than any desert. I would enter her, fulfill the form of the law, and withdraw before the act was complete. My seed, my legacy, my strength, I poured it out upon the earth as if the dust could bear suns. Each time my conscience whispered, and each time I hushed it with reason. It is not my child. It is not my name. I will not raise heirs heir. And slowly, my soul hardened. I walked among the tents during the day and laughed with my younger brother Shela. I nodded to the elders and prayed with my hands raised high. I wore obedience like a cloak, but by night, I sinned in silence. Each time I walked into Tamar's tent, I told myself it would be the last. But lust does not tire easily. Pride even less. What began as rebellion became a rhythm. What began in guilt was now a game. And worst of all, I thought I was getting away with it. The land groans. The soil dried. The herds weakened. The rain slowed. And yet no one saw the connection. Only Tamar. I saw it in her eyes. Each morning when she rose from our bed, I could feel her disappointment. But she never cursed me. She never rebuked me. She simply lived quietly with the burden of being dishonored by obedience. Because unlike me, Tamar was still faithful. She had given herself fully to the law, and I had given only enough to look righteous. I stood in a field of golden grain, ready for harvest. But when I reached down to gather the sheaves, they crumbled into ash. A voice thundered behind me, not loud but full of judgment. What you spill in secret, I will judge in daylight. I turned but saw no face, only a shadow. Then the ground cracked beneath me, and a flood of blood rushed from the soil, covering my feet, rising past my knees. The blood was mine, and not mine. I awoke choking, sweating, with the scent of burnt grain in my nostrils. The growing distance. Tamar stopped speaking to me altogether, not out of hatred, but heartbreak. She looked older, weaker. The months passed. There was no child, no sign of life. Judah began to ask questions. Why is she still barren? I shrugged. Perhaps the Lord has closed her womb. I lied. To him, to Tamar, to myself. But the Lord does not sleep, and secrets rot faster than flesh. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the herds were being gathered, Judah summoned me. We sat by the well, where the shadows were long and the stones still warm. She is not with child, he said. No. Why? She is barren. He looked at me for a long time. His eyes were dark, unreadable. You are my son, he said finally, but even sons can invite the wrath of God. Then he rose and left. I did not sleep that night. The sin that sinks. Have you ever tried to silence a guilty soul? It never truly quiets. It simply grows tired, and numb. By the end of that month, I no longer felt shame. I had given myself fully to the sin, not out of ignorance, but out of defiance. Each time I spilled the seed, I did so with intention. Each time I hardened my heart a little more. No child of mine will bear another man's name. That became my creed. And so my doom was sealed not by one act, but by repetition. Willful, chosen, repeated rebellion. On the 7th night of the new moon, I saw something I cannot explain. I was walking past the boundary stones at dusk, heading to Tamar's tent. The wind was still, the sky bruised with purple and fire, and there, just past the fig tree, stood a figure in white, not blinding, not shining, but still. I stopped. My heart pounded. He said nothing. He only raised one hand and pointed downward, then vanished. I ran to Tamar's tent, drenched in fear, but I did not change, not even then. The secret becomes a curse. They say what is hidden in darkness will be shouted from the rooftops, and I say now, it is true. What I did in secret cursed the very earth beneath me. The ground that once received my seed now cried out against me. And though no man knew, God knew, and that was enough. There comes a moment when even the wind holds its breath, when time stops, when the sky leans low, and God speaks. I did not expect it to come when it did. Judgment, I thought, would be a shout, a crack of thunder, a pillar of fire. But when it came for me, it came like breath stolen from the chest, like the slow breaking of the soul. It began like every other night. The tent was quiet. The air was dry. Tamar lay still, veiled as always. I had performed the ritual, the sin. I rose as before, reaching for the water jug, but something was different. My breath shortened. My heart fluttered once, then again. I reached for the tent post, but my knees buckled, and that was when I heard it. Enough. Not spoken, not shouted, felt. A word thundered into the marrow of my bones. a word not from man. Collapse I fell, not gently, not like sleep. My body hit the earth with the sound of a man who had mocked the heavens one too many times. My fingers twitched. My mouth went dry. Tamar rose slowly. I saw her face fully, for the first time, unveiled, beautiful, grieved. She didn't scream. She didn't flee. She only whispered, "You knew," and I did. Judah's voice, fading. I awoke, or thought I did, beneath the stars. Judah's voice echoed somewhere far off, calling my name. I could not answer. The sky above me cracked with light, but it was not lightning. It was fire. Not the fire of earth, but of heaven. My body burned without flame. My soul twisted within me. I had made myself an altar to my own pride, and God had come to tear it down. The face in the light. A figure approached. It was neither man nor angel as I had imagined them. His face was like polished bronze, eyes like blazing coals. And he did not look at my flesh. He looked through it, to my thoughts, my lies, my seeds spilled in rebellion. I tried to speak, but my voice, it had been taken. I tried to rise, but my legs, they were dust. The figure pointed to the ground beside me, and there the earth opened, not wide, not violently, just enough to receive me. I saw not fire, I saw not chains. I saw something far worse, truth. The truth of what I had become, a man of partial obedience, a worshiper of appearances, a thief of legacy. I had robbed my brother, mocked the covenant, used the holy act as a shield for sin, and now I was exposed, no cry for mercy. I thought perhaps I might beg for mercy, but mercy must be desired, and in that moment, I knew I had never truly desired it. I had wanted comfort, pardon, release, but not repentance. And so, he let me feel the full weight of my rebellion. My lungs screamed, my spirit broke, my bones shook, and then silence, spirit unmoored. When the final breath left me, I did not vanish. I hovered, spirit unmoored, not fully in Sheol, not fully in the world. I stood over my lifeless body, watching Tamar close my eyes. She wept, not for loss, but for the waste. Judah came. He fell to his knees. And I watched it all, powerless. There was no burial song for me, no feast, no honor. The servants dug a shallow grave. The scribes did not linger on my name. I became a whisper, a warning, forgotten by man, marked by heaven. But in that liminal place, between breath and eternity, I was given a glimpse. I saw Tamar's future. I saw her disguised in widow's robes, deceiving Judah. I saw her carry twin sons, Perez and Zerah. I saw the bloodline stretch forward, to kings, to prophets, to Messiah. And I wept. Not because I was forgotten, but because I could have been part of it. There are many sins, but the worst is the one you justify, the one you hide beneath tradition, the one you perform in the name of duty, yet poison with pride. That was mine, and heaven saw it. There is a silence that follows death, but it is not peace, it is not rest, it is not sleep, it is weight. The weight of what could have been, the weight of what was never spoken, the weight of truth stripped bare, without the armor of excuses. This was my descent, not into fire, not into shadow, but into the truth. Not yet in Sheol I expected oblivion. When my final breath left me and my body crumpled to the earth, I believed, perhaps hoped, that all would fade to nothing. But instead I lingered, unseen, untouchable, unheard, somewhere between the land of the living and the halls of the dead. I walked among the tents and fields. I saw the sun rise. I heard the lambs cry. I watched Judah stare long at my grave, lips moving with words he never spoke aloud. I stood beside Tamar's tent, watching her hands tremble as she held the garments I once wore. I was not alive, but neither was I gone. Judah's guilt. Judah did not mourn me the way he mourned Er. He did not cry aloud. He did not sit in ashes, but he changed. He grew quieter, meaner, distant. I heard him mutter once, when he thought no one listened, 2 sons, taken by the same woman. And though he never said it, I knew. He blamed Tamar. He thought she was cursed, but it was I who carried the curse. I who had kindled the wrath of heaven, not her. She was obedient, I was not. She was faithful, I was false. But it is always easier to blame the woman. Tamar remained veiled, withdrawn, dignified. Even in grief, she carried herself like royalty. And yet I knew, behind her stillness was fire. She had been robbed of husband, of future, of justice. She had given her body to the law, and in return received betrayal. First from Er's wickedness, then from my deception. Yet still she remained, still she waited, still she believed. And somehow that faith condemned me more than judgment itself. If you have never died while your soul remains conscious, let me describe it. It is not like sleep. It is like drowning in your own memory. Every moment replays, every thought, every lie, every time I spilled the seed and told myself, no one will know. They rose like phantoms in the air. I could not escape them. They whispered constantly, you were warned, you were seen, you were chosen, and you chose yourself. I had believed I was clever. I had believed I was in control. But in the light of eternity, cleverness is ash, and control is illusion. One night, I do not know if it was a dream or some gift from above, I saw a vision. A great tree. It reached into the heavens, its roots tangled in the bones of the earth. From its branches hung names, names not yet born. One of them glowed like fire, Perez. And from that name, the tree grew even taller, stretching into a throne, into a cross, into a crown. I fell to my knees. Perez, the child who would come, from Tamar, not from me, but from the line I had rejected, from the legacy I had scorned, and I wept. Sheila, the last son. I turned my gaze to my younger brother, Sheila. He had always idolized me, followed me, believed I was strong, but now I saw fear in his eyes. He looked at Tamar as if she carried death. Judah promised her Shelah as husband when he came of age, but I could hear the truth in Judah's heart. He would never give her Sheila. He feared the pattern, feared losing his last son, but in doing so, he became what I had become, a man afraid to honor the law when the cost was too high. The sins of the sons become the fears of the fathers, and the cycle tightens. Time moves strangely in that place of in-between. I could not touch, could not change, only watch. And from that helpless watching, something new began to form. Not repentance, I had no body in which to repent. Not penance, I could offer no sacrifice, but understanding. For the first time in my existence, I understood what I had rejected. The seed was not mine. The name was not mine. But the obedience was mine to give, and I had refused. Then came the moment that changed everything. Tamar, bold, wounded, burning with righteousness, left the house of mourning. She took off her widow's garments. She veiled herself. She sat in the path where Judah would pass. She tricked him. She seduced him. She bore twins by her father-in-law. And when he would have condemned her to death, she revealed the signet and staff he left behind. "Do you recognize these?" she asked. I was there, invisible, watching Judah tremble and then speak, "She is more righteous than I." And with those words, the heavens trembled, the gates of mercy. I do not know how long I remained in that place. But when Judah spoke those words, I felt something shift. The sky lightened, the wind stirred, and for the first time since my death, I felt warmth, not the fire of wrath, but the fire of mercy. It did not erase my sin. It did not restore my life, but it opened something in the fabric of time, a gate, and on the other side was legacy. This was my descent, not into fire, but into truth, not into Sheol, but into regret. There is no torment greater than to watch the world bloom from the seed you refuse to plant. When a man dies, he thinks it is the end, but it is only the thinning of a veil, the beginning of vision. The living see the world as a river, flowing forward, always forward. But the dead, we see the full flood, the ripples, the echoes, the way one man's decision swells into a storm or sinks into stillness. This is what I saw. And in that seeing, I began to understand. Time unwound. I had no body, no hunger, no breath, no heartbeat. But I had awareness. I drifted, not on winds, but on moments. Years blurred into one another like waves in the desert. I watched the tents of Judah grow into tribes. I watched children born, men die, women rise with fierce grace. I watched the name I refused to carry bloom from Tamar's womb, Perez, and I followed him, like a shadow, like a forgotten father, like a soul hoping to glimpse redemption in the faces of descendants. The boy who should not have been Perez was loud, joyful, stubborn like Judah, fearless like Tamar. When he was born, his brother Zerah tried to emerge first, stretching his hand into the world. But Perez pushed past, a breach, a bursting forth, and how fitting that was. He broke through pain, through silence, through the ashes of my rebellion. When I first saw him, glowing in his mother's arms, I thought, that should have been my child. But no, he could never have been, because the child of disobedience does not carry the name of promise. I watched as Perez grew into a man. I followed his sons, and their sons, and their sons after them. I stood beside the cradles of men who would one day lead armies, plant vineyards, build cities, and shape the soul of a nation. I watched blood and soil become scripture. I saw names carved into stone, not with pride, but purpose. And each time I saw one of my would-have-been descendants walk the earth, I whispered to the wind, remember me not for who I was, but for what came after. Rahab. In the far future, I saw her, a woman of the city, wrapped in scarlet. Rahab, a harlot yet favored. She took in the spies of Israel, hid them beneath her roof, risked her life for a God she did not yet know. She married into the line of Perez. Her name should have been lost to time, erased by shame. But the same God who judged me redeemed her. And I learned that mercy does not ask where you begin, only where you're willing to go. Boaz. Then came Boaz, a man of strength and kindness, a merchant, a guardian. He saw Ruth, not with the eyes of men, but with the eyes of God. He took in the Moabite widow. He honored the custom I had defiled. Where I withheld seed, Boaz gave freely. Where I mocked the name of the dead, Boaz lifted it high. I stood at his wedding in silence. I would have wept, had I any tears, and I realized what I refused to give, another man would honor. And through him, the line would not only survive, it would rise. David from Ruth and Boaz came Obed. From Obed, Jesse. From Jesse, David, the boy with the sling, the poet, the warrior, the king. I watched him from afar, dancing before the Ark of the Covenant. I saw him slay giants and fall to temptation. I saw him repent. I saw him break. I saw him write psalms with blood still drying on his hands. And I realized, even kings are born from scandal, but it is not scandal that defines them, only what they do with it. And David, great, flawed David, was the fruit of Tamar's defiance and Judah's shame, the fruit of the lineage I once denied. What the dead whisper. We dead, we whisper to one another. We do not use voices, we use memory, regret, hope. Some curse their names, others cling to legacies. But I listen, and I watch, and I marvel. Because though I am forgotten on earth, the ripple I set in motion still moves. Not through my obedience, but through God's design. I stood once beside a hill, centuries after my bones had turned to dust. A man hung on a tree, his hands pierced, his side bleeding, his eyes closed. They called him Son of David, but I knew the blood. I had followed the line. He was the seed of Perez. He was the harvest I refused to plant. He was the redemption I never asked for, and yet still received. Before I was taken from the veil that separates earth from Sheol, I was given one last vision. Tamar, old, wrinkled, eyes full of storms and stories. She stood with her grandsons, Perez's boys, and she smiled. She had done what no one else dared. She had demanded justice, and in doing so, birthed not only sons, but destiny. She looked to the sky and whispered, "The Lord sees." The dead do not sleep. We watch, we learn, and if God is merciful, we understand. I was not the father of the line, but I bore witness to it, and sometimes that is enough. What is left for a dead man to give? Only his truth, and so I offer mine. Let this be my confession, not before the elders, not before my tribe, but before heaven and all who read these words. I have nothing to gain now, no legacy, no forgiveness, no name, but I owe it to those I wronged, and to the God I defied, to Tamar. I do not know if the wind carried my name to your ears after I fell, but if it ever did, let it not be remembered in anger. I betrayed you. I was meant to honor you, to raise up seed in the name of my brother. That law was not just a ritual, it was a mercy, a way to protect the widow, to restore the name of the dead. You came into our household with courage. You gave yourself to a man who did not love you, and when he died, you submitted again to law, to duty, to me, and I used your body but withheld the blessing. I feared what it would cost me to give you a child. I feared raising a son who would not bear my name, so I chose myself. And that choice, that selfish, quiet choice, echoed louder than any sin done in rage. You never spoke an accusation. You didn't need to. Your silence judged me more than any priest, and I accept it. You were righteous. You were brave. You carried a legacy I refused, and now your name lives on. Mine does not. To Judah, Father, you looked into my eyes many times, and you saw the reflection of your own. But I wonder now, did you see more? Did you know? When you stood by the grave, when you told Tamar to wait for Shelah, did guilt rise in you? You taught us strength, but you also taught us pride. And pride, when unchecked, becomes a fire that eats its own house. I do not blame you for who I became, but I wonder, if you had said, obey God, even when it cost your name, would I have? Perhaps not. The truth is, I had enough warnings. I had your words. I had Tamar's sorrow. I had the withering of the land. I had my own soul crying out. And still, I chose disobedience. But Father, your line continues. Through your failure, through Tamar's fire, and though my name faded, yours was remembered. You stood before Joseph in Egypt and offered your life for Benjamin. You changed, and that gives me hope. To the son that was never born, my child, you never came into the world. Your feet never touched the dust. Your breath never warmed a mother's breast. And that was my doing. Had I obeyed, you would have grown. You would have carried Er's name, not mine. And that is why I denied you. I wanted only sons that would glorify me, not sons who reminded me of the brother I resented. But you would have been righteous. You would have been born of a noble woman. You would have lived in covenant. And maybe, just maybe, you would have taught me how to walk in God's way. Forgive me, you never had a voice, so let mine be yours. Let this confession cry out for the life I refused. To my ancestors, I see you now. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, men of covenant, men of flaw and faith. You walked with God, stumbled and walked again. I am ashamed to be named among you. You obeyed at great cost. You trusted when there was no proof. You believed in the promise of descendants like the stars. And I had one act to complete, one seed to plant, and I withheld it. Not from rebellion against the law, but against love. Love for legacy, love for a brother, love for the God of the covenant. But still, your faith bore fruit. Even when I failed, your line marched on. Even when I died, your story continued. And that perhaps is the greatest mercy. To the God I defied, O Lord of heaven and earth. You made the stars. You formed the breath in my chest. You commanded life and gave the law. And I gave you half. I gave you my hands, but not my heart. I obeyed in public and rebelled in private. I feared men, not you. I thought you did not see. I thought you did not care. But now, I know better. You saw, you cared, you judged, and in your judgment, there was justice. But I ask, if only once, let there also be remembrance. Let not my name be written in shame alone. Let it stand as a warning. Let it cry out, not for vengeance, but for truth. Let my failure teach others to give you all, not part, not almost, not enough, all. To those who read this, if you are still living, if your body still rises with the dawn and rests beneath the stars, then hear me. Do not waste your breath. Do not delay obedience. Do not dress your pride in piety. Do not trade your soul for a name carved in your own image, for it will fade. The only name worth carrying is the one God gives. If Tamar taught me anything, it is this: God will finish the story, even when men fail. So choose to be part of it, before the ink dries, before the breath ends, before the ground opens. This is my confession, spoken not to clear my name, but to lift up his. I was Onan, the son who withheld, the brother who refused, the man whose sin was quiet, but whose judgment was loud. Let my silence no longer speak for me. Let my confession do what I could not. Honor the God who sees. I am Onan. My name may be forgotten by men, but not by the God who writes even the failures into his great design. I was a man who chose himself, who clothed rebellion in silence, who obeyed with his body, but defied with his heart, and I paid the price. But even in death, even in the ruin of my legacy, I learned this: God is not mocked, but neither is he finished. He takes what is broken and brings forth blessing. He plants redemption in the soil of disgrace. He uses the womb of a widow to birth kings. He uses the courage of a cast-aside woman to ignite a lineage that would carry the Messiah. And yes, he even uses the memory of a disobedient son to teach the living. So if you still breathe, take heed. Obedience is not measured by what you do when seen, but by what you choose when no one is watching. God sees beyond our actions. He judges our motives. Half-hearted faith is a full rebellion. Your seed, your legacy, is not just what you create, it is what you surrender. You cannot kill God's promise, but you can remove yourself from its glory. And above all, know this: even if your name fades from the tongues of men, the God of heaven still remembers. Not to condemn, but to redeem. So let my story be the warning, and let Tamar's story be the hope. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to follow and subscribe for more powerful, faith-filled Bible stories. Each one brings the word to life in a new and inspiring way. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment. More amazing stories are waiting. God bless you.